Welcome, everyone. So the next speaker we have is a lawyer, also DeFi co-founder. You're advising the blockchain dreamers, right? Also building Keom protocol, but I'd like to bring up to the stage Anna Grace. Thank you. Let's give a little applause as well.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction. So, as mentioned, I'm both a lawyer at MME Legal in Switzerland and a DeFi co-founder. So basically double trouble because I have all the technical problems and then all the legal problems all combined together. Hopefully, my goal today is to make sure that you don't regret sitting here instead of drinking coffee while it's raining or being at a different presentation. So provable compliance. What the heck is that? So I'm presenting to you something that I hope will become a new narrative that may gain some traction. So let's dive into what is provable compliance. First of all, I need to clarify what is meant by compliance. So be reassured, this is not another AML KYC-oriented talk. It's more broader than that. It's much broader than that. So the current situation. Let's recap slightly. When we hear about compliance, we think about regulations that set standards, and there are some good ones. I like to think about regulations as good tested recipes with some spices that are added there. Some of these spices are, for example, the fact that we should have some reserves that may be useful. We should prevent market manipulation. It's kind of good for users. You may want to have some insurance and this kind of things. It's basically all spices put together, and it's like a good recipe. So it's not all bad, and it's not all to be set aside, although it creates some burdens. And then organization may set policies as well, with which you may want to comply. And how do you ensure people comply with them? Well, you need someone to monitor violations and sanction them. So it's like a deterrence system. It's not because the policeman is around the corner that you will avoid doing mistakes and doing silly things. You may still decide to do them. So here it's more about deterrence. You may think twice before doing a silly thing because you know that the policeman is just around the corner. So what would be the future situation with this idea of provable compliance? These standards would be hard-coded. So not all can be hard-coded, of course. I mean, some logics cannot be really transposed into code, even if we wish they could be. You would have ZK proofs that actually can be generated by everyone and confirm that it was complied with that. So you know that the code ran as it was supposed to. And basically you would have dApps preventing, not only deterring, some specific things. So instead of having a regulation telling you, hey, you're not supposed to front run, someone is supposed to monitor whether it happens, the code would simply prevent any front running. And then you don't need centralized actors because the code does it all. So it's like the ultimate promise of DeFi. Instead of the regulator thinking about how can we have someone overseeing the markets and ensuring this or that, you would basically have the code taking over this responsibility. So the regulator would finally be able to sleep calmly and have nice dreams. So why should we even care about this? Like, why would a developer even bother to think about how to transpose regulations into code? Why should we change the way we build DeFi and potentially also CeFi? Well, because we have a love-hate relationship with regulations. Like, now it changes a bit because we all know like the risk of potential regulators from the US chasing down some protocols, so we care about it. But at the beginning, most developers were just setting regulations aside. It was like this meme of not think about it, I don't hear the regulator, I don't want to care, we are decentralized, it doesn't matter at all. Well, regulators annoy DeFi, but they can also actually help DeFi in some aspects. Because first of all, there's a major problem of understanding what is DeFi. So I may identify as DeFi, but I may not be according to someone else. Like all these debates on what is the actual level of decentralization. You may end up with debates on Discord whether having a kill switch is actually still maintaining you in the decentralized space or making you a centralized protocol and so on. Then also there's no disclosure requirements, meaning everyone discloses whatever they want to. Like you need to basically put on your Sherlock Holmes hat on to understand, thanks to Medium, Discord, documentation, Twitter, and so on, how specific protocols operate, what is the governance, and so on. And each protocol discloses different data according to different standards, so it's not that easy. And when we analyze projects as lawyers, we spend a lot of time simply trying to understand the case because the information is not digest. And for users, it's the same. And having no standards imposed by anyone is kind of a mess. And there's also no standards in terms of frameworks and best practices. One protocol may have let's say, some reserves, another one will not. How do you know what is better, what reserve sets correctly? Basically, what we are used to is knowing that protocols are developed correctly from a technical perspective. There are some technical audits, but it does not guarantee quality. It's not because my transaction went through and everything functioned correctly that you had best execution and this kind of things. So we could have industry standards for that, right? Like all of these problems could be solved by the industry. But from an external perspective, it would actually help if the regulator just took those industry standards and set some guidelines by saying, hey, DeFi is cool because this is the standard. If you have this kind of level of decentralization, it's DeFi. If they disclose this kind of information, we can actually kind of trust them because they know what they're doing. And if they comply with this kind of basic standards, transposing those good recipes we know in their own fashion, it's good. Now, why is this important? I said before, well, you don't want to end up like these cats being all stressed, because if the regulator does not acknowledge DeFi and simply says, hey, we're not regulating it, we're not even tackling it, it's like a bunch of degens just doing their stuff and building products from themselves, well, we will never grow, because no financial institution will start interacting with you. CeFi is now, let's say, will probably boom because of regulations showing up. Like you can prove you have a license, user can trust you, and so on. What about DeFi? Also, it may lead to better reputation. We've all heard about all the exploits that happen. We can always pinpoint at they could have done things differently, they could have done this and that. Well, if we have some standards, we can say, hey, at least we comply with the basic standards. This still happened, but it's not because we were bad actors in the first place. So it may kind of improve the reputation. And finally, currently, we all hear about the SEC chasing down some projects every month or even every week. Well, regulatory enforcement is not actually the key to a sustainable environment. If you build unicorns that potentially could be taken down by any regulator just because they don't like it anymore, that's not the best way for the future. So this is why we should care about proving that DeFi can be built in a more responsible way and differently. And this is what could be done thanks to provable compliance, basically, by showing, hey, we acknowledge what you do in TradFi and CeFi, but we kind of transpose it in our own way. So instead of waiting for the regulator to tell us what to do, we just do it in our fashion and try to convince them that it's the best thing. Now, what is Polygon Miden, which is potentially one of the ways of implementing this provable compliance? Well, it's just not just another ZK chain. It's actually a non-EVM compatible chain that uses Rust as a programmable language. For now, you have an alpha testnet that's live. The public testnet should be live quite soon, by the end of summer. A ZK virtual machine, I mean, I will not dive into that, but I would rather spend time on explaining a couple of features that could be interesting for the narrative I just explained. So first of all, you have accounts and nodes. Polygon Miden is a bit as if you had Ethereum and Bitcoin having a baby together. You have each account being a separate smart contract that holds all the funds, and you have nodes thanks to which these accounts communicate. You need to consume nodes to have a transaction. So what are accounts? Well, as I mentioned, each one is a separate smart contract with code and storage. So you have your assets in your account. It's not just the issuance smart contract or the token. These are actually associated with your account, not with an issuance smart contract when you interact on Miden. All assets are first stored locally, and you can have both fungible and non-fungible assets. What are nodes? It's the way of communicating. And each node has a script, inputs and serial numbers. And I'll come back to the nodes, but the way nodes are structured are actually the key to potential provable compliance. All these nodes communicate in a synchronous manner, and lovely animation. And transactions are state transitions of single accounts. So when you have a transaction, you basically update the state of the account sending the funds and the account receiving the funds. So you need two transactions, two nodes, like the node and two transactions to update all of it. And there is a proof for every transaction. It's a stock proof. Now, what are the use cases of this very general presentation? This is where the key part kicks in. We are working on the first one, how to prevent market manipulation. And it's actually a very trending topic. Just quite recently, a couple of days ago, we've read across media and NX how all of a sudden, MEV could be a problem because you have those market abuse rules. It's actually not such a new thing, because anything that's market abuse with MiCA, the European regulation, is something that was in the text like already last year. It basically extends anything that's prevention of market manipulation from traditional finance to centralized actors providing crypto asset services. So it was already out there. The only thing is now we have guidelines on what could potentially be market manipulation, and we have some also guidelines on how to detect them. I mean, those guidelines are quite broad, basically a bunch of information you collect which may help identify it. So we still have the problem of how to concretely identify it, and as I mentioned before, you can't guarantee it's spotted, and it's just about deterrence. Someone is supposed to watch you and identify that you've done something that is not correct according to regulation. So it's an important topic. And if we think about market manipulation and order books, we are working on an on-chain order book. You don't really have many attempts at it currently. Well, if you have an on-chain order book on paper, well, all is public, so you actually help front-running to a certain extent. And still, the matching script most of the time is run off-chain, so even if you decentralize the way it's run, well, it's kind of still a black box. You don't see how exactly things happen, and it makes identifying manipulations kind of tough. So, be it sexes or like decentralized on-chain order books, they're kind of supposed to prevent market manipulation, but how do you make sure they did that? You can't pinpoint and say, hey, you've missed that one, if you don't actually see it coming. So on top of that, all of this is only for centralized actors, and nothing happens for decentralized actors. So basically in DeFi, you could end up having open waters, an ocean with plenty of sharks, front-running, wash trading, and doing whatever you want, and nothing happens. This doesn't seem like an appealing market to trade on. So the current state would be billions are lost to front-running. Liquidity is sometimes fickle. You place a trade and actually you realize it's not there. And prices are manipulated. It's part of the fun, but still, it's not interesting to everyone. So now choose your enemy. Do you want the AMMs with the known shortcomings or the order book manipulations? And this is where the provable compliance narrative actually kicks in. What could we do? How can we unlock the future of trading with Miden or other technical solutions? Miden is just one of them. Well, I've mentioned that nodes carry assets, but they also have those spend conditions. You can insert a script there. And those scripts could cover any topic you may imagine. So spend conditions are ZK protected, you know it's there. Transfers require nodes to be consumed, so basically before it's consumed, nothing happens, and nodes remain tied to the account. So if the script is not complied with, you still keep all these funds, and everything is there with you. The assets remain under your control. It's not like in other contexts where you send your assets to a centralized exchange and then you hope for the best. So you keep like the ultimate joystick in trading. And what could you insert in the spend conditions to make it interesting? Well, let's dive in a bit further into it. Well, for a simple note, I just pick one of you in the audience and I say, hey, I'm sending you these funds if on top of that you can prove that you have received other funds from someone else, so that together with these funds you can basically finance a new event. Like, I'm only lending you money if you received enough funds from someone else on top. Then this note will only be executed if this condition is met. I've put it in the script. You could have a swap note where you also need to prove something in advance. For example, I don't want to swap with someone who interacted with that specific wallet. I can put it in the script. And then this is the interesting use case. You could have an entire order book where in the script you insert the matching script with all the conditions that are associated with it. So basically you know that anyone who committed to the script in their note is interacting with that exchange. So what would be the future order book as we're building it with Kiam on Miden? Well, you have ZK proofs basically acting as gatekeepers. So you implement best execution directly in the code by inserting basically the reference to the matching script, which is public, audited. It's not a black box anymore. You know exactly based on which logic the orders are matched. You insert it in the node. You don't need a centralized entity anymore to overlook how things happen because it's in the script. It's ZK protected, and basically if you try to tamper anyhow, there will be no consumption of nodes because the scripts don't match. It's part of the conditions. So if I say I only want to be matched with another order that inserted the matching script from the Kiam order book, well, you need to comply with the conditions of that script. If you try to add something else on top, there will be no match, no order, and since your funds were still attached to your account and the node was attached to your account, nothing happened. We haven't touched your funds, there was no tampering, there is less risk. And this even works if the node is private, which is potentially possible with Miden, because the script is there. So even if you don't see it, the script still needs to be complied with. Now, another application, and I said it's not just another AML talk, well, actually AML, it will be interesting. Currently, you have a lot of ZK solutions where you can generate certificates with proofs and like say, hey, I have complied with some AML requirements in this jurisdiction, I have not interacted with any tainted funds. Well, with Miden, you could put it in the script as well. You could basically have a list, for example, of sanctioned wallets and refer to that list in the script as well, making sure that if you want to send funds to someone, this transaction needs to be also verified based on whether the other address is on the list of sanctioned countries. So even on a peer-to-peer basis, you can actually refer to that directly in the transaction. I thought about initially maybe inserting a link to this, but in the Polygon Miden playground, which is available, if you check on the Provable compliance, you see an example of code where basically you realize that if the program doesn't stop in the context of this transaction, it simply means that it can be executed because the address of the destination was not on the list of some sanctioned wallets. It could be any list. Of course, it raises questions in terms of who sets up the list, who controls it, and so on. But the initial idea is still interesting because it means you can really embed this logic in the script of the node, meaning in the transaction directly, instead of relying on external solutions to be implemented with your dApp and so on. And this is basically it, but as a summary, the idea was just to present to you why compliance could matter to developers, and if we think differently about how we develop products and build them. So we always think about how to be more innovative, how to create new trending products, but what if we thought about also building responsible products that don't scare the regulator off and are not only directed at people who are open to risk and having great investment opportunities, but also are simply reliable for the masses and something that can be even recommended without saying, hey, you're using it at your own risk because we have no clue how it's going to work out. So I hope this is an open call for you to think about what Polygon Miden could allow to develop in the future, because I've mentioned 2 use cases, but I bet there are other ones. And also think about how other technologies using ZK proofs could be utilized to prove to the regulator that all these standards that those guys in suit and TradFi apply, we can apply them even better. Thank you very much. And if you have some questions, no?
Questions?
But then I hope you can dream about provable compliance now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.